Austen Allred, who is the co-founder of BloomTech, which he started in 2017. They've raised over 130 million, and last year he launched Gauntlet AI. So give it up for Austen Allred. All right, so yeah, we'll kick this off a similar way. I think it'd be great to give you guys a little bit more context on Austen, and so if you could just start off by sharing a little bit about your background, how you got into this world of education and education tech, and then we'll take it from there.
Awesome, yeah. Good to see everybody. Good to say hello. Yeah, my background. Oh, hey, see some graduates and people I know. Yeah, so I dropped out of college, lived in my car, and taught myself how to code. And then I had a bunch of friends asking me how I did that, and started, originally teaching some friends how to code so that they could do something similar. And almost a decade later, I'm doing some variety of, helping people get into tech, or, our goal is overall to move people to the most valuable point of an economy that there is, which obviously AI plays a pretty big role in today. But yeah, that's a high level behind me, I guess.
Amazing. For those of you who are sitting in the back, we've got a lot of open chairs over here. So if some of you guys would like to come up here, and some of you guys up there as well. So very cool. So then tell us about how was it launching that first company? I think looking into your story, that was your first company, BloomTech, and it was about 2017. So what was it like going out and trying to raise money, going out and trying to, validate the concept, and did everything go according to plan?
Everything definitely did not go according to plan, but in the early days it was interesting. So we had decided that we didn't want to raise venture capital, which I know that he already had said that we'd raised more than 130 million. So that part definitely didn't go according to plan. But originally, we were a little bootstrapped company. It was me and my co-founder. We were happy to keep growing it as a bootstrapped company. And originally all that we wanted to do was put a really good code school on the internet. 'Cause they're local code schools. They're all in person. But I came from the middle of nowhere in Utah, so the folks that I knew, they weren't going to move to San Francisco to learn how to code. They were going to do it all virtually, and that's a thread that kind of goes throughout my career, that people are not trying to help people not be limited in their career options based on where they happen to be based geographically at any given time. But so yeah, we're running a code school, teaching people to code online. And then one of the early students said, hey, I would love to participate, but I don't have enough money to fund this out of pocket. Are there loans available? And I was like, what if you just paid us a little deposit? It's like $1,000 or something, and then you pay us the rest after you get hired. And if we're as good as we say we are, then you should be willing to do that. And so I haven't caught up with him in a few years, but he ended up being an engineer and paying us back and the whole thing. And they were like, okay, well, if that worked for that one person, we've got a lot of extra room in our classes. What if we selected 20 people a cohort or 40 people a cohort, and we ran that kind of a play? And that ended up completely blowing up, became its own industry. We ended up using a financial instrument called an income share agreement, or an ISA, that some of you have probably heard about. We ended up recommending that to the White House. The White House said that would be a good replacement for student loans in the first Trump administration. And as soon as they said that, all hell broke loose, and regulators were very determined to shut anything within a mile of that down. So we fought a regulatory battle for a few years, and now we're in it's still the same company, but found a different angle that is much, much better. And we can talk about that as well. But yeah, that's the abbreviated version.
Love it. And then what led you to launch Gauntlet AI a year ago? You were growing BloomTech, and it obviously had some challenges, but what led you to go build something else? Now how's your time look like between the two right now?
Yeah, so BloomTech is effectively wound down. I mean, Gauntlet AI is still part of the same corporate structure of BloomTech, so it's still the same company technically. But what actually happened is, we're going to all of our companies that hired from us saying, hey, what do you, when you're hiring people, the hiring market obviously shifted for junior engineers over the past few years. So what is it that you're looking for? What is it that you want? And everybody said AI, AI, AI. And we would say, what does that mean? And nobody knew. They didn't know what it meant, but they all wanted it really badly. So we sent out a research team, and they went kind of company by company. Our original goal, this is right after ChatGPT came out, was to figure if any of it was actually useful or if any of it was real. Because at the time, I mean, it's not dissimilar today, but a whole lot of hype and not a lot that actually moved the needle that we found. But what did move the needle was really, really important and not well understood, and the best practices didn't exist. So originally, we started teaching companies how to use AI to build software, and nobody knew how to do it yet. Cursor didn't exist yet. Claude Code didn't exist yet. You're using early versions of ChatGPT. You basically had to build what now comes with Cursor and Claude Code in order to make it worthwhile. So our introductory lessons were like, okay, here's how to build a RAG pipeline that will take your code base and feed it to your coding agent, back when nobody knew what an agent was. The tools caught up along the way. But then some of the companies that we were teaching to do that were seeing crazy gains from their engineering team, and basically came to us and said, hey, we need to go, we're teaching people to do this a little bit on the side. We need to go all in. We need to find new people, bring them in, have them spend more than 1,000 hours just building with AI, and then we'll guarantee to hire all of them on the other side, and we'll pay you some money for every engineer that you bring to us. And that became Gauntlet AI, and now we work with a bunch of companies, not just the 2 or 3 companies that we started with, but it's been very successful overall so far. Yeah,
I love it. And did you always see education as this tool for economic mobility? I know you mentioned that you dropped out, so it's ironic. You dropped out and then got back into the education field. So what is that kind of like a calling from an early age, and you just felt like the educational system was missing something, and you could make it better?
Yeah, it's actually the reverse. I had a pretty miserable education experience, and I was determined to stay as far away from it as I could. But there were a few things that I kept waiting for people to solve a couple of problems, and nobody was. And so, originally, like when we launched what was then Lambda School and became BloomTech after a trademark lawsuit, we really just wanted to solve one very specific niche need, and we had to use education as a tool to do that. Now, I'm a decade into an ed tech entrepreneurial journey. But I definitely didn't see education being a place where my career would end up. It just was the right tool for the job that we needed to solve. So.
And I know that you were a part of Y Combinator back in 2017. It was Sam Altman was running it still back then. So what was that like? What were some of the learnings and takeaways that you took from that? And did it really give you an early boost when you were getting started?
Yeah. I will forever be grateful for Y Combinator, and PG is a close friend and investor, and they changed everything for us. So first of all, we barely got into Y Combinator. Normally you have one interview, and then after that interview, they call you a couple hours later to tell you whether you got in or not. So me and my co-founder, we had our interview. You could tell where there was skepticism and where there was excitement, and so we're trying to weave, through that. And we left and we went to lunch. We're like, all right, that was it. We'll, wait to hear back from them and see if we got in, and ordered pizza, and we're gonna eat pizza. And they called us an hour later, and they're like, hey, we need another interview with you guys. So can you come back? So we paid for the pizza, never got the pizza. Went back to Y Combinator, had another interview, and they're like, okay, since this is the second interview, just go wait outside. We've got another couple interviews to do, and then we'll just come tell you in person whether you're in or not. So we were out there sitting on Y Combinator's couches. They came out and they said, we're still not sure. Can you come in and interview one more time? We did one more interview, and then they're like, all right, we've got 2 more groups to interview. I think our interview was at like 10 or 11 a.m. It was 4 or 5 p.m. by this point. So we'd been at Y Combinator all day doing multiple interviews. We got done with that one, and then they said, just one more interview. We've never done this before, but we're so on the edge about you guys. We just need to talk to you one more time. And then after that one, they said, okay, we'll call you probably tonight, which we assumed meant we weren't getting in, because if we were getting in, they would have just told us. But they called us that night, and we got in, and it was great. I mean, the big thing Y Combinator did for us is it increased our expectations of what is possible and compressed our timeline a lot. So, we were a 6-month-long school at the time, and our plan was to just do one cohort every 6 months and then do another cohort 6 months after that. Our partners were, ironically, Daniel Gross, who now runs one of the big AI companies, and Jeff Ralston, who is their education guy. And they were basically like, why aren't you starting we had a gazillion applicants. We only had a handful of teachers, so we could only handle a small number of people. And they were like, what's stopping you from starting another cohort next month? We're like, oh, we've already got a cohort going. And they're kind of like, so hire more people and start another cohort. And that compressed our timeline from what would have been, we're planning on 200 students every 2 or 3 years to 500 students every 6 months, and then it just got faster and faster from there. So it was a little bit crazy. That meant we had to raise VC, which we hadn't originally planned on. Now we've raised 130 million and change, which is a whole other saga. But I love PG. PG wasn't a part of that. He met us after the fact, and has become a good friend and mentor of mine. But yeah, I love YC, and I think the learnings there will, forever change who we are as a company, and helped me personally so much.
And for those who don't know, when he says PG, he's talking about Paul Graham, who's the founder of Y Combinator. He has some incredible essays on his website, paulgraham.com. And when I was first getting into the startup and venture capital world, I read all those essays, and it was life-changing for me. So that's incredible that he's a close friend and investor to you. Well, we've got a lot of early stage founders in the room, and I think you've obviously had a tremendous amount of success and have been able to navigate some really difficult things. So I'd love to hear your perspective on fundraising, and maybe some of the lessons that you learned, what tends to work, what doesn't work, what worked well for you, all those things.
Yeah, so I think one of the mistakes that a lot of founders make, myself included at the time, is viewing fundraising as an input, not an output. So what I mean by that is, if you fundraise from the right fund at the right time at the right valuation, then your company will go really well. What actually happens is the reverse. If you have a really good company and it's growing insanely quickly, then all of the good investors try to invest in you. So our early rounds of funding were not difficult, to say the least. They were fielding calls from billionaires, turning down them trying to give us a bunch of money. That's because the company was in a really good spot. Later, we had times when the company was not in a good spot, and I couldn't raise $1 million if I tried for 6 months. So the fundraising, now my mental model is entirely build a great company, and if the company is good enough, fundraising happens almost automatically. I mean, it's still work. You have to go pitch people. You have to go get introductions. But fundraising is not the hard part of building a company by 100x. And now, Gauntlet is very profitable, doing very well, and we have offers to fundraise all the time, but we just don't need to. And that's way better than, I think it's fair to say at a time we were probably among the hottest companies in Silicon Valley. I had people, there were gifts showing up at the office every day. There were event invites all the time because investors were just trying really hard to invest in the company. All of that went away with the first sign of any trouble. All of that, is dust in the wind, as they say. And if I could change one thing, I would have focused way more on building a company and way less on fundraising. Fundraising is by far the easiest part.
Now that you're in a position where you're profitable, you don't need the money, you can kind of pick and choose who you want to work with. What are the main things that you look for in an investor? I think a lot of founders they think whoever offers them the first check, they should just take it, right? But it's a long-term relationship, and you really want to make sure it's mutually beneficial and that you're gonna be both aligned on a similar vision. So, what are the things that you look for in an investor?
Yeah, I think what I look for now is a little bit different than what you look for at the seed stage. So now we've got a big cap table. We've got we're back to a small-ish team, but we're very profitable. So now I look for there has to be a reason for me to take money from an investor, and I haven't found that yet. So we just haven't raised. In the early days, oftentimes you need the money. It helps to have a little bit of validity, like me saying that we're backed by Y Combinator probably changes the way people perceive us inherently. So there's a little bit of that, but I'm also in the position where our early backers, the people that were in our seed round in 2017, as an example, Google Ventures led our Series A along with Stripe and the Collison brothers. The people that worked with us at Google Ventures moved on to other firms, and then the people that replaced them have moved on to other firms, and the people that replaced them have moved on to other firms. So bearing that in mind, what really matters is who's on the board, who has board control, and your incentives being aligned. Other than that, I think there are investors that helped a ton along the way. But I think the most important thing is just board control. And sometimes taking the first money that comes to you might not be the worst thing. There are different buckets. I'm pretty cynical, if you can't tell, as far as venture capital goes. And I say that as someone who's invested in hundreds of companies personally. Most investors add little to no value, if not slightly negative value to the company. So the most important thing that they bring is cash. There is a small number, and I'm talking less than 5%, maybe 1%, that actually help. Those are worth their weight in gold, but you don't often get to. If those people are offering you money, you take it, and it's not a question. So, yeah.
Love that. So you spent a lot of time in your career in Silicon Valley, which is, everybody says, the best place to build, scale startups, raise money. But now you're in Austin. So how did you end up here? When did you come here? What led to you coming to Austin and building here?
Yes, I spent 5 years in the Bay Area up until COVID hit, and then we left for what we thought was the weekend and never went back, pretty much. So we came to Austin because the companies that wanted Gauntlet were in Austin. I moved to Austin in December/January of this year. So many of you have been in Austin for longer than I have. Austin has a very different feel than Silicon Valley. There's some of it that's not as good. There's some of it that is much better. The downside of Austin versus Silicon Valley is just the sheer numbers. I mean, obviously, in San Francisco, I'm originally from Utah, and in Utah there are the $4 or $5 billion companies that everybody touts all the time. And the first day that I showed up for work in San Francisco, I walked into our building. We're in the financial district of San Francisco downtown, and I looked up and down who was in the elevator, and there were $7 or $8 billion companies in our elevator shaft. So comparing that to the entire state of Utah was pretty eye-opening for me. There's just a ton of money and experience flowing around in Silicon Valley. The downside of that is oftentimes the distraction levels are extreme and the hype levels are extreme. Like, there's an entire underlying social scene and framework of Silicon Valley around who's legit and who's not at any given time that doesn't actually matter in the long run, but it can be very, very distracting in the short run. Austin, on the other hand, is obviously much smaller. There aren't as many big outcomes. There's not as much. There is a lot of. There's, in my opinion, capital is not the constraint around really any powerful company. If you have look at how much money OpenAI and XAI and all those they're raising gazillion dollars because there's a reasonably high likelihood that becomes worth something. The startups in Austin tend to be over-substanced and under-hyped relative to the companies in Silicon Valley, and I love that personally. As an investor in hundreds of companies, the number of times that I see a company that everyone is worshiping on X and everyone thinks is super, super hot, and then I get their financials back, and you're like, ugh, like you're not actually doing good. You're not doing great. Everybody thinks that you're the best thing since sliced bread, but maybe you can figure it out. But now you have to figure it out on the highest stage with all the pressure and everybody trying to kill you instead of just laying low and building a great product that people love. Austin, it's often the reverse. I'm talking to a company and talking about helping them fundraise, whatever, and they send over their deck, and I'm like, wait, you guys are doing what in revenue? And like, you guys are profitable, and you're how many people? Like, that's not a feeling you have in San Francisco very often. Austin is over substanced and underhyped, which I really, really enjoy. So.
Amazing. We're going to open it up to questions here in a second. I'm going to ask maybe one or two more. So if you have a question, keep it in mind, and we'll pass the mic in a second. So you've invested in hundreds of companies. What does somebody need to have for you to invest in them?
I mean, I don't think first of all, my checks are like $10,000 falling on a giant. So I'm not like, if you're looking to fundraise, I'm not the first person you go to. I sneak in the back end when I meet a founder that's cool. So I'm not a VC by any stretch. So for me, it's really like 99% who the founder is, because the stage that I invest at, the metrics are usually pretty early. I mean, there's some semblance of, I'm looking for, is there a founder who can create product market fit? Oftentimes there is product market fit, and that makes it easy to determine whether a founder can create product market fit. But if you're around the Valley for long enough, I've worked with companies that are just trying so hard to sell their vision, and they've got a full go-to-market and sales team, and they're growing a little bit, and everything's just an uphill battle for them. And then there are companies that you go talk to, and you go talk to their sales team, and their sales team goes to lunch, and they come back and they're like, oh, we just sold $1 million, and they didn't do anything. That's what product market fit is. That's very, very difficult to create, and you know it when you see it. So I try to find people who have the potential to create that. It's exceptionally rare. It's lightning in a bottle. It's extremely difficult to create. But I think most founders would do better off spending more time trying to generate that lightning in a bottle than trying to ram what they currently have down the next person's throat if it's not what they want. It's just really, really hard to sell something that people don't want. And that's where most founders lose, is you think you have something, there's a little bit of interest, and so you go all in on it, and it's just not there. And that's what investing is. I invested in, to give you an example, Perplexity's seed round. Perplexity was a cool little widget that you could use to query AI stuff. Now they've raised like an $18 billion valuation or something crazy like that. I wouldn't have in my wildest dreams predicted that Perplexity could do that, but the founders were so sharp, and the way they thought about the space was so interesting that even though their seed round I thought was way too high priced, and I invested, and that turned out to be one of the best investments I've ever made. So it's at the end of the day, you're just trying to find great people.
Amazing. What was the seed price for Perplexity, if you can talk about it?
I'm not sure what's public. I think it was like 200 million for the seed round, which is bonkers. And 18 billion divided by 200 million is a good multiple. So
it's pretty solid. Let's give it up for Austen. We're gonna take a couple of audience questions here, and Patricia will help us pass the mic around. So.
Rush, you're number 2. Joe missed it.
All right. Joe Barbello with Marsh McLennan. Austen, thank you. That was fantastic. I've talked with founders in the past that are working or are VC backed. and some of them have kind of talked about their dream being sold. Is that something from the founder not setting the precedent with their VC partner? If you could kind of give me a little bit more. Or when they're taking on investments. Excuse me. Let me rephrase my question. When working with VCs, they give up their dream in order to please investors. And does that come from them not setting expectations with their team, or kind of, if you could talk on that? Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in incentives, and that it all comes down to incentives. Sometimes founders' incentives are aligned with a VC's. Sometimes they're not. And there were times where, I'll give you a concrete example. Right after we had just raised a little bit of money, we had a big acquisition offer that I would have been set for life and then some. And our early investors would have made like 5 times, 10 times their money, which isn't a bad thing, but at seed stage, 10x, you need 100x returns in order for it to be meaningful. So that was the first time it was like, oh, actually our interests are a little divergent here. And that just happens. I mean, if you understand the economics of how VC works, for me, I've invested in hundreds of companies, as I've said. All of my returns will come from like less than 5 of them, right? That's just the world of VC. That's how it works. Not all of my returns, but enough that most investors don't fully wrap their head around that, or founders don't fully wrap their head around it. So there is a divergence there. I strongly believe that the right answer is for the founder in that instance to make sure that they control the board and they can tell the investor what makes sense and what doesn't. There was a time when that was very difficult. Now is not that time. The expectation now is that founders control their board, because that's how you get great outcomes. Mark Zuckerberg would have had to sell to Yahoo for $1 billion if he didn't control the board. Boy, aren't all of his investors glad that they gave up board control to him, right? And yeah, there might be counterexamples of that where a founder could have made $10 million and instead they made $2 million. But if you're a VC, none of that matters half as much as whether or not you get into the next Facebook. So for founders, the answer is to control the board and then tell the investors what's going to happen, and they can't do anything about it. Now that, there's always subtle pressure and advice will be given to direct you in a way that reaches the outcomes that investors prefer. You don't always recognize that when you're a young founder trying to make your way in the world, that what they're telling you, there's saying, hey, when you raise that next round of funding, you should spend it all. You should hire 70 people because that's what the business demands. That might actually be because that makes it so that you have to raise another round so that you have an uptick in valuation so that they can go raise their next fund. Like it's all incentives. But at the end of the day, the goal for a founder should be to control everything and then do whatever you want and tell everybody else to deal with it. And I say that as an investor. That's what I want my founders to do too.
Thank you. Hi, I'm a angel investor with Calacanis, the launch syndicate. So my question is about revenue companies when you're trying to be an investor. The golden rule with our company is you need to be 3 times or 4 times ARR growth to be investable. What are your opinions on that?
I think that's a good rule of thumb. I mean, you can get tricked in both ways. You can, there are companies where, they hit $1 million ARR and then they plateau there. That happens all the time. There are companies where they grow really fast, but it was, then they have crazy churn and they shrink. I try to look at every company from first principles and just, does this make sense? What happens if you extrapolate this? Do I believe that you can extrapolate this? Those are, there's no real magic to it, especially in the early days. but the companies where it's the hardest are the ones where it's taken them 4 or 5 years to get to $1 million or $2 million in ARR, and it's been a slow and steady climb, but there's not anything that indicates that they would be moving beyond linear. So for me, it's about what shape the curve looks like today and what it could look like in the future. There are great businesses that, over the course of 3 years grow to $1 million in ARR, and 3 years from now, they'll be at $2 million in ARR. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not necessarily a venture, VC backable company. On the other hand, I invested in a company that looked like that called Replit a few years ago, and they were they were slowly growing, but they had a giant community behind them. So I don't know if their revenue growth was even 3x. It might have been, 1 or 2x, or they were doing very little revenue because they weren't focused on that. And Amjad, the founder and CEO, had different investors around the table who some loved that they weren't focused on revenue, some hated it. Turns out, they're in the right place at the right time, and I think they've released that they grew from 3 million ARR to 100 million ARR in 6 months, and then 2 months later they were at 150 million ARR. So it's always hard to predict. Obviously, I invested in them before ChatGPT was a thing, so I wasn't, betting on the long-term LLMs making coding easier, and they had the right data set and the right user base. None of that was real. I just liked the founder and liked the community that they were building. So as a general rule, I think that's a good rule, but devil's always in the details. And if you rely too much on heuristics, especially at the early stage, you can get tricked a lot. Figma is another example. Dylan is I remember chatting with him at a conference in 2019, and they were one of those companies that had very little revenue for 8 years while they were just making their way through the wilderness. I think it took them 8 years to get to $1 million in ARR. And then I had talked with him a couple years after that, and they were just blowing up. And one of the investors at the conference we were at had offered them to invest at $1 billion valuation, and he's like, obviously I have to take it, but I feel bad. Does this guy not realize we're not worth that yet? And now I think they're worth 20 billion. So whoever made that investment was one of the best investment, at that stage and that size, phenomenal investment, career-making investment. But yeah, when stuff works, the through line in VC is when it works extremely, extremely well, and 99% of the time it doesn't quite work. So it's just finding those, black swans, as PG likes to say. Yeah.
All right, one last question, and then we'll have more networking.
Hi, I'm Brent with PowerCuff. I'm a founder of PowerCuff. So, Austen, what do you see as the biggest breakthrough invention where the invention gap right now, where the tech is ready, but the imagination's not there yet?
So where the invention where the tech is ready, but the imagination isn't there yet. I guess by definition, I don't see that because my imagination isn't there yet. So that's some of it. But yeah, I think a lot of us. So I spend all of my time thinking about AI and generative AI and LLMs and all that stuff. I think there are a million people trying to figure out what to do with AI, and the obvious answers all come back to us that go build an agent to do customer service, go build an agent to do that, go build the exact same SaaS business model that you would have, but put AI in it. And if you look back to when the internet was born, it felt very similar, right? No one predicted Google. No one predicted 99% of the things that exist today. That's a really difficult thing to predict. So I think I know there are applications of AI that are unique and clever and something more than, building a RAG pipeline that feeds in some data and then there's a chat bot that's a little bit smarter. I don't know all the examples of what that is, but I'm really interested in where the UX and the use case of AI diverges from chatbots, because I think everyone's kind of locked in this chatbot API world, and the people that are experimenting with UX have a lot more opportunity to do stuff with. That said, most of the companies that I have been the most impressed by, I wouldn't be able to tell Mark Zuckerberg to create Facebook because that's not the world I live in. But when he explains it to you, you're like, yeah, that kind of makes sense, right? Not that Mark Zuckerberg, I've met him, but he didn't explain Facebook to me, and but yeah, I think there are people who have unique insight that can be applied in interesting ways. And by definition, I don't know what all those people are because it's not my unique insight. So,
All right, let's give it up for Austen. So in closing, I got 2 asks for everybody in the room. So we've been hosting events since 2017. We've gotten tens of thousands of founders and investors in the same room. And what I found makes every event super valuable for the people in the room is if everybody here will just take a moment, approach somebody you've never met before, introduce yourself, no agenda, and ask how can you help them, right? How can you open up your network to help them? What are they looking for? Who can you connect them to, right? And that'll make it so much more valuable for everybody who's here in the room. And then number 2, if you enjoyed hearing from our incredible speakers today, if you'll take a picture, with somebody you met or at the event, post what you learned, post what you enjoyed, tag people that you met, and yeah. So the last thing I want to close with is a quote that we would always say when we first started hosting events, back when I was a college student, like 10 years ago. And it's, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So let's have some fun, let's mingle, and let's make some new connections. Thank you for coming, everybody.